Hey everyone. So drawing lips can seem really tricky, but with a few tips and the right techniques, it's actually pretty easy to do for beginners. So I'm going to show you 5 different tips today that you can use in your drawings to draw better lips in your portraits. Okay, so my first tip is to think about the shapes that make up the lip. So what I mean by that is that you can see that they obviously have very specific shape, but they also kind of have geometric shapes that are within the lips. And so you can kind of put like two circles in between the bottom lip and then an oval on the top. And that helps people sometimes understand that the lips are sort of made up of shapes and can help your drawing as you're starting out. And in terms of understanding the shape of the lips, you want to look at the specific shape of whatever you're drawing, right? So people have different shaped lips. Sometimes people have thin lips, sometimes people have, bigger lips. So it just depends. And those are the kind of things that you want to sort of observe when you get going with your drawing. Okay, so the second tip is that you want to avoid really harsh outlines. And the reason for that is that when you have really harsh, dark outlines, it flattens things out. So if you notice in the ones that I already drew and the ones that the one I'm drawing right now, I don't actually have a really thick outline around it. Instead, I'm using kind of like lighter weight lines. And so if you're someone that you've been starting out drawing and you've been just like adding, a pen outline that's really like heavy and dark, and it's just sort of like overwhelming the look of the drawing, you want to try to avoid that. And so what you can do instead is once you have your pencil outline, you can kind of go over it really lightly with lightweight lines, but you don't even have to do that. You can actually use the lines that you're doing with your hatching to make up those edges. So that's the second tip, just avoiding those really harsh outlines. And later in this video, I'm going to show you one where I do have kind of a harsher outline, just so you can see the difference. And I think that once you see the difference, you'll be like, oh, okay, I see that. And maybe you're actually doing that in your drawing, right? And that's flattening out your drawing. Okay, so the third tip that you want to do is that you want to use good line quality that will sort of match the form. So what I mean by that is that the lips have a 3D quality, right? So they're not flat. They have a surface to them that is sort of rounded, but it's not like super rounded, right? So you're trying to use your lines to best convey that form. And the way to do that is, so if you notice with what I'm drawing, they're sort of like rounded, curved lines as if it's literally going over the surface of the lips. And so later in the video, I'm going to show you a couple variations to how you can use line quality to be really interesting in a drawing. But this is one way to kind of get started and think about the roundness of the lips, and it will help build up the form just with using lines. And whenever you're using pen and ink, this is really an important concept to understand, because that's what's going to help define your volume and 3D quality of your drawings. Okay, so the fourth tip is that you want to have a lot of contrast. So what is contrast first? Contrast is basically just having a lot of variation between darks and lights next to each other. That generally makes for a more visually striking drawing. And the way that you can get contrast is literally by like doing what I'm doing, right? So I have the shadow from where the lips come together. And then you have the light part kind of next to it. And that is what's going to help give it a lot of volume. So you want to make, a lot of times, the part that's kind of in the middle part where the lips come together pretty dark. And then, the surface a lot of times is lighter, because that's usually where the light is sort of hitting the lips. And so if you want to get more contrast, you're going to basically just leave the white of the page. And as I'm doing there, you can either actually literally map out the highlights if you're kind of afraid that you're going to accidentally go over them, or you can just be, kind of conscious to that you want to leave them really light. Okay, so for my fifth tip, I'm going to show you how to layer lines to create a full gradient of values. So what I mean by that is that you want to think about your full value scale and how you can use the whole value scale to show the form in the most effective way. So going back to that first tip, what I did was I started by sort of mapping out really quickly the structure and those basic shapes that I talked about at the beginning. And that kind of just helps. So if you want to do that, you can even do that in pen really lightly, or you can do that in pencil. And so for this one, I wanted it to look a little bit different than those other ones that I've drawn already. And I'm going to go in a diagonal direction following those arrows. And you're going to just see a different version compared to the other ones that I've drawn, just to kind of switch it up a little bit and show you, different ways that you can use your marks to get different types of effects. Now, if you're trying to get your drawing to look really sort of like realistic in 3D, I do think that the one that drew previously is a little bit easier for beginners to start to use, because then it's like you're actually already kind of mapping out the 3D quality of the lips. But this is like a little bit more of like an advanced way of doing your drawing. So if this is just like something that you might want to try just to kind of like have fun with a different way of drawing. So the trick with this is that you're going to be really consistent in how you're making your lines going in that same diagonal direction, but you're going to think about value, going back to the fifth tip, that you want to try to create a full value scale. So when you are trying to make a value scale, you're thinking about, do you have the darkest darks? Do you have midtones? And then you're using the negative space of the whites of the page to leave white so that you have that light value scale, because, obviously you can't go back in and add white. So you're just sort of like being careful to leave those white areas so that they stay as your light values. So as you can see here, I'm just by layering, and you have the shading usually sort of around the lips, at the bottom and the top, and then the middle part is usually pretty light. And what you can do is by sort of like shading underneath where the chin is, that actually kind of like pops up the lips and it makes it look more 3D. So a lot of times what you can do is, instead of really worrying about that lower part of the lip, you should think more about the chin and how the chin is sort of interacting with the lips. And by being in shadow, it's going to make the lips a lot more 3D looking. So always kind of think about not just the lips in of themselves, but also the area around and the shadows that are kind of like underneath the chin and above the below the nose and above the lips and kind of like at the sides of the mouth. And I'll show you more of that as we go on in the video. Okay, so we've done the 5 tips, and I wanted to just show you a few different ways of drawing. In terms of, this one is lips from the side. And at the beginning, I talked about how I would show what happens when you have kind of a thicker outline. So I did this in this one just to show you, where above the lip, how that's that dark outline. And it's just more graphic. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just going to not look quite as realistic, right? So these are just things that you want to think about in your drawing. Whether you want to have a harsh outline or not, it's gonna flatten it out. So it does that here. I think it does flatten it out. But if you add some hatching kind of around that area, it kind of softens it a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to show you again these 5 tips that I've been talking about, but in a different shape. This is like a puckered lips shape. So again, I start with a light pencil outline. I start with sort of looking at the overall shapes, thinking about those circles and the shape at the top. And then this one, I'm just doing a different line quality, right? So I wanted just to show you some different variations of how you can use your lines to show the form. So the first one that I did, if you look back there, the lines were a little bit slower in how I drew them. And this one, I'm drawing a lot faster, right? So my line quality is quicker and it's a little bit more gestural. So these are things that as you're drawing with pen, you can think about, what do you want to do with your lines? Do you want them to be quick? Do you want them to be slow? These are all things that you can use to kind of make your drawings more interesting and just switch it up. So, again, it's like not like there's one way of doing a pen drawing. There's a lot of different ways, and you can experiment with different, different versions of these. So I wanted in this whole video just to show you a few different things that you can try, whether you want your lines to be quick or slow, or the one where I was going on a diagonal, and the one I'm going to do after is going to be kind of just doing a vertical line quality. So again, these are just different things you can experiment with, and just to kind of like see what comes easy to you, what you enjoy doing. And those are the things that I would suggest practicing. Please help me out by subscribing to the channel. That really helps grow the channel, and I really appreciate that you're watching, and I hope that you're getting something out of this video. If you also leave a comment, that really helps get it out to a lot more people, and liking the video, that helps as well. So I hope you will do all those 3 things. So as we continue on with this drawing, I'm basically at this point, just what I like to do with any drawing that I'm doing is that I spend some time kind of like refining it and making sure that I have as deep dark values as I want to have. And again, going back to this idea of the full value scale, you see that in this, right? And you see that in all of these different drawings. You see that there's really dark values, there's midtones, and there's lights, and there's kind of like everything in between. So what I want you to do is look at your own drawing and sort of ask yourself, this is what I would always tell my students. I'd say, look at your drawing and ask yourself, do you have those values? Actually take the value scale if you've done that exercise. I'll link that in the comments, and actually put it up next to your drawing and ask yourself, do I have all these values in here? That will really help you. Okay. Okay, so now for this last one, I'm going to show you another way of working where you're going to be using your lines going in a vertical direction, right? So I start by plotting out those shapes that I talked about at the beginning, and now I'm just using those vertical lines to start to build up the value. And as you can see, I don't have any heavy dark outlines around it because, as we talked about earlier on in this video, those dark outlines, if you use them, it's going to flatten out your lips. So you don't want to do that. And then I'm layering to build up the form. And, as I talked about earlier on in the video, this idea of using direction of line, I think that it's important to practice using direction of line, but you can also practice doing stuff like this because you're still using a lot of the same concepts, right? So even though the lines are going vertically, instead of, rounded and showing the form that way, this is still another way to achieve a good amount of volume in the lips. But so I would say practice it both ways and just try to see the different, you'll learn a lot by just doing both different ways. And I think that that will really help you as you're learning to draw with pen and ink. And so as you can see here, I'm also thinking about the little crevices towards the side of the lips. I'm thinking about the area above where, the area between the nose and the mouth and how there's usually that divot there. And then I'm starting to build up that full value scale that we've talked about throughout this video. And once I have the value scale, I'm also thinking about contrast. So the way to do that again is to keep layering your lines. The more you layer your lines, the darker they're going to get, and the more you're going to be able to achieve that value scale. But if you go over your white areas too much, you're going to lose some of that value. So you also want to be mindful of keeping some areas, either white or gray so that you can achieve those different types of values. So let me know in the comments what you thought of this video. I hope it helped you with your drawing. Please subscribe, like the video, comment on the video, and I'll see you next time in the next video. Thanks again for joining. Bye.